Hola, mi cava su cava. Well, hardly know where to start tonight. Let's start at the beginning, I guess. Okay, this is in reference to the longest games played and stuff like that. And I hope this first statement isn't actually true. My head's bursting from pleasure and joy. Ooh, I'll bet that was messy. When I was in junior high, 83, we'd spend the night at my friend's house and play non-stop from Friday night till Sunday early evening, pausing only for brief moments of sleep and pizza. During those days, a 4-hour session would seem very short. Well, yeah, and mainly only youth are able to do those kind of numbers, hours anyway. And hey, that's great. I have had several people come up to me over the years and tell me that D&D saved them from getting in trouble one summer, or more than one summer. That it was something to do and that they'd play all day. And hey, great. Number one, they weren't getting in trouble. Number two, they were improving their minds. Number three, they were learning social skills. Win, win, win. Is there a story behind Trump's Amazing Player's Handbook cover? I'm vaguely aware that that WotC retcon, what's that word? Retcon the idol to be Morlock when they published L4 Deep Dwarven Delve. However, I'm interested whether or not you knew of Tramp's true intentions with this famously evocative scene. What can you tell me? All right, I'll tell you what I know. I know that Tramp was given some parameters, that there was some sort of conversation in the art department, and probably with Gary to Dave, Sutherland's Dave to Trampier. But knowing how it was going back then, it was probably Dave and Dave with Gary. And he was probably given some parameters of, we think this would be cool or that would be cool. And then Tramp said, okay. And as I recall, nobody saw anything until he walked in that day with it completed, and everybody just went, oh, wow. Tramp was often like that. You never got to see his preliminary stuff. You never got, it was, hi, what do you want? Okay, and he'd bring you in a finished product. I just know that it was evocative of what we were trying to do, and it was, of course, it's become an icon. Okay, and then in follow-up to that, there were two. Please regale us with the story of Sturmgeschütz and Sorcery from Tactical Studies Review, Volume 1, Number 5. Were you there for the festivities? No. What can you tell us about it? Only what the article said and what Gary told me, and thought that it would be a great opportunity to explore mashing genres before we were calling them that, okay, or even using the word mashing. We were looking to bring in more stuff. Now, recently I saw a thing on Facebook about gunpowder. Nope, Gary didn't want gunpowder in D&D. Yes, Dragon Magazine or somebody, one of the books said, here's how to convert Boot Hill. Well, okay, and in bringing in a weapon as an artifact or something with only so many bullets or whatever, not a problem. Magic Thunderstick. And that's what it would be presented as. A boomstick or something of that nature, having otherwise no gunpowder in the game. And I thoroughly agreed with him. This is something we talked about when I was still at Carbondale, and my input was that Gunpowder is definitely modern. Your setting is medieval. And remember, this is at that time. And it would be a bad idea to bring in gunpowder to what is basically a 13th, 14th century European setting. 15th century, I don't care. You know what? You get where I'm going. And I think he was just waiting to have his viewpoints ratified by someone else because that's the way it was. Now, did he bring guns in every once in a while? I'm told he did. Guns kind of ruin fantasy. I'm reading I just got done reading a Terry Pratchett book, Men of Arms or Men at Arms, and in it someone has a gun, Gonne, the old English spelling, the Saxon spelling, Anglo-Saxon spelling of gone, and it causes no end of trouble and is a wildly imbalancing element, and of course. When it's all over, the offending weapon is no longer available. I agree with that. Magical flash powder, or something that an alchemist could come up with, is one thing beyond something that you might trigger that would blind everybody at night or something like that. That would just be a burning powder, which didn't have to be gunpowder, and as long as it's not contained before it's fired off. Yeah, if you want to, fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Sturmgeschütz and Sorcery was just a game they played out on the game table one day. It was more minis game than anything. They using D&D rules, and it was just a big lark. Let's see, what would it be like to have fireballs and lightning bolts against a half track and trolls and what have you? And if you've read the article, you can see it was great fun. And yes, there was gunpowder, but that was a one-off. They didn't take the STKFC 251 back with them. They didn't take any of the machine guns back with them. That was a one-off. And there's no reason you can't do that once in a while. But I personally think that adding gunpowder is a bad idea, and guns are worse. Did you ever find out who submitted the Witchcraft supplement for Dungeons and Dragons in the Dragon? Or to the Dragon? I gotta be honest. If this came... I vaguely recall something knocking around in my office for a while that we attempted to find out who wrote and couldn't, and figured, okay, we'll publish it and they'll let us know it was them, and it never happened, so I have no idea whatsoever. At the time, it was grotesquely sexist, because we were looking at something that would appeal to female players. And the only, at the time, logical route would seem to have been that direction. However, as further novels and such unfolded, yes, we had female sorceresses, and nothing wrong with that. But at the time, we were desperately searching for something that would appeal to female players, that they could feel comfortable in the role. Okay, this must have been in response to how do I get a bunch of old school player. Okay, this is a rap on 5e players and their style of play. Thanks for the advice. I started running a 5e group with some gamers I met online, and it's to the point where the moment I mention anything at all, perception, insight, investigation, you name it, they roll it before I can even ask them to. Expedient, but for the love of nat 20s, that's their deepest interaction. I am to describe and give them clues of everything. Between that and your advice, I know for sure I'm going to run a BX Labyrinth Lord game soon. Yeah, and there's a response to that, a reply to that. My table rule is you never roll without me asking you to. Describe what you're doing, and maybe I'll ask you to roll, maybe I won't. You might just succeed based on your description. And I think that's a great idea. Don't roll before you're asked, because if you do, I will make you roll over again. And I'll give you some bogus bullshit excuse about karma and alignment of forces and whatever, and that roll didn't count because you weren't being tested or taxed or tried. And when you are, then you roll, because that roll then reflects anyway. It's my rule also, and I think it should be considered by anybody who has a group like that. Okay, this was a comment on my how many classes. You say you're making good on listing classes in the style of Andy Rooney's bottled water video. Yeah, I vaguely remember that. I loved Andy Rooney. He got bugged by something, he just went on and carped about it, and he did it so well. Tim, Helming the Dragon, you introduced several recurring columns, some of which featured certain authors, such as Gary or Len LaCoffa, while others provided material statted out for AD&D, such as Dragon's Bestiary, Bizarre the Bizarre, and the intriguing and ever-debatable Giants in the Earth. Well, that was well after me, I believe. One of the undervalued columns, it seemed to me, was up on a soapbox, which attempted to bring issues to the forefront which are larger than the gaming table, but not from the pen of the editor. This approach wasn't without controversy. I believe Gary himself wrote disapprovingly of one column, thus proving the independence of the editor in the process, but nevertheless spurred thinking on what we were up to with our game. Was this your intent when you installed Up on a Soapbox? Did you consider the experiment in providing a voice to the fan base outside of the typical content articles to have been a positive one? Did you receive any grief over any of the viewpoints in these articles? Well, Up on a Soapbox was reader-submitted questions and material. I don't remember Gary writing a refutation. I believe that might have happened during my tenure, and yeah, it did prove my independence. And he probably wanted to rush in and whitewash over and wallpaper some holes that maybe he had exposed or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, that was I've always felt that. The letters to the editor was one of the absolutely most important parts of a newspaper, because it was the common guy writing in and hoping that his idea was so well worth considering that it would be shared on the op-ed page of the newspaper. And it was also a good place for, spurring a debate, back when debating was much more civil. And we had editors editing what was actually being said, and not this shitstorm that we get on Facebook all the time. So yeah, I wanted a place for people to make comments. I wanted a place for people to ask questions, and some of those questions then led to follow-ups and articles. And I felt that any responsible publication should have letters to the editor, if for no other reason that they could write in and say, "You're full of shit, Tim, and here's why." Today all you get, "Oh, you're full of shit," and they hit send. So yeah, that's why I did it. I'm sad to hear about the book bannings, including Mouse, by McMinn County, Tennessee Board of Education over concerns about rough, objectionable language and a drawing of a nude woman. Are you aware of successful book bans on D&D during the Satanic Panic days, or any time really? What effect do you think book banning has on culture? I don't think any book should be proscribed. I think that's a parent's duty to determine what their children read or don't read, and if the parents don't give a damn, then the kid is free to read whatever he wants. Good reason for parents to at least get an idea of what your kids are reading. The banning of Mouse is impossibly egregious. To be taken out of a segment on the Holocaust is just monumentally ignorant. So much ignorance, I'm surprised the state of Tennessee can hold it all. Some of it must be lapping over. Has a D&D book burning ever worked? No. It just means we sell more there. That's what it meant. I don't know what it means for WotC. I understand there's another right-wing nutjob pastor that's doing it again just this week. If you tell, and this is part of the book banning thing too, I would hope that parents losing their shit about all this would be enough to make a lot of kids go, whoa, I got to check this out if they're so upset, just by their natural, inherent rebellious behavior. Oh yes, that is a Total Con shirt I'm wearing. This 3-length sleeve Total Con t-shirt, I got 2 of them. They're the best sleeping shirts there are. Anyway, back to the story. It never worked. Tell somebody they can't have it and they're going to want it more. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't always lap over in books because, oh, good, I got to read it. But hopefully enough of them will go, well, what's so terrible here? I thought it was a very accurate, very relatively tasteful recounting of the Holocaust and its effects. And to pull that out of a Holocaust segment in the school curriculum is just asinine insanity. Probably remember Catherine Carr still working through her Devery series. Iron warps the etheric energies through magnetic effect or some such. Good, great, you're right. It does that in her books. And the main reason was, and we didn't want magic users to have an equal starting chance. We wanted it to be hard to become a magic user. Because once you get up around, make it to 3rd, 4th level, all of a sudden you are massively more powerful than any other 4th level. Now, granted, in a party that all started out together, by the time the magic user makes 4th, everybody else might be at 5 and 6. Even so, once a magic user makes 5th and gets that fireball capability, Katie bar the door. You're more powerful. You can take out 5th level, 6th level, 7th level creatures and players. 1 fireball is all it takes. Boom. All dead. Yes, we put in restrictions so that magic users didn't take over the world, so to speak. And if you don't believe that's likely to happen, then tell you what. Start up a game and put on no restrictions on the magic users. Play it for 6 months and tell me we weren't right. A comment on Divine Right. Still have a set, needs players. I know. Isn't that a bear? I have so many great games sitting on my shelves that I can't find enough people to play with. All right. The kind of RPG consumer that actually buys the kind of sources you're talking about, with dozens of classes and hundreds of spell, monsters, and magicizers, aren't people that actually play the game most of the time. At best, they think about playing and get excited by this kind of excess. At worst, they're just compulsive hoarders who are satisfied with the idea they own a whole set of useless rules. You probably have a very good point. Two very good points there. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Okay, what are your thoughts on perhaps overly implied setting of modern D&D? I personally found it caused lore lawyers to crawl out of the woodwork, and I think they may at times be worse than the run-of-the-mill rules lawyer. A rules lawyer will quibble over mechanical matters and wording of spells, but a lore lawyer will quibble against other players about what the setting is supposed to be, and to break immersion in the process. I personally had such a run-in with a guy who admonished me for simply using demon and devil interchangeably. I understand some baseline things like a world with elves, dwarves, and spell slots, but the minutiae of Forgotten Realms or Planescape being declared canon across all game worlds kind of ruins the magic. I agree. And I'll go one bit farther. Don't do it. Hold on before your head explodes. If your world has certain established rules and mechanics of magic and physics and what have you, and you want to, at some point, you're just, oh God, I got to give them something else to play. I can't create another one right now. I'm burned. And you want to go to one of these others, that's fine. That's fine. Transport them there. Don't play it in your world. Play it in a Planescape setting or, whatever setting you want. Hey, man, it's magic. You can time travel. You can play in another dimension. Works for me. Okay. Dear Tim, not sure if I'm too late with this one or not. Let's roll the dice. Okay. How do you feel about including NPCs in games that are a bit meta, such as a person that calls themselves the gatekeeper who keep a gate and engages the PCs in some sort of question-answer situation before allowing them through? That type of thing. Is it too cliche? Hell no. Hell no. One of my absolute favorite movie characters is Tim the Enchanter. Answer me these questions 3. To be honest, I was doing that type of thing before I ever saw that movie. It's kind of a trope or a stereotype. I don't know if I use that right. That there should be people that are gatekeepers, are doorkeepers, are portal keepers. If there's a good rationale for it, well then do it. I don't think it's cliche, unless you just stick in some pro forma, robot machine that'll incinerate you if you don't get the answer right. But certainly, anything that encourages anything other than hacking and slashing, I feel is a positive addition to your game. Hacking and slashing is one thing. Thinking is a whole nother, because you can't roll dice for thinking. Alright, now I've got somebody who wants to argue about armor proficiency. I'm familiar with the points you mentioned on mail or plate's weight and limitations on ranged emotions. I follow several arms and armor YouTube channels, and even own a Bernie myself. Of Course armor is heavy and can limit your movement. That's why I include penalties of speed, agility, endurance for wearing it and make sure I keep track of the encumbrance, which armor contributes to greatly. My point was you don't need much specialized training to wear it properly. A crash course, you know which piece goes where, and some experience is a few hours. Wearing it to acclimate yourself to the added weight, something you couldn't pick up. Nothing someone couldn't pick up in an afternoon. Well, that's bullshit right there. Because if you wish to recover your full physical capabilities that you had before you put on 30 pounds of chain, or even 20, not one afternoon, to get used to it, to regain your speed in that. That goes against normal baseline logic. Ask anybody that's gone into any of the boot camps and then gone out on a hike or a run with a knapsack full of crap on their back, just whether or not they can get used to that added weight in an afternoon. Ain't gonna happen. Alright, now he goes on to talk about rigorous training, etc., etc., etc. Alright. In my world, the way I play, there's no training when you go up a level. That's bull. I don't care if Gary said it or not. In my world, my operating logic is, if you have gotten to the point where you can be a higher level, you've already learned those things getting there. You're so good at what you were, the level you were, now you're a new level because you've learned things. In my world, clerics know all their spells, which I treat as prayers, at the next level when they make it, because that's part of learning to become the next level. Same with thieves. I don't send them to Mort's Pickpocket Emporium. When they go up a level, they have learned enough tricks, successfully done enough things that they have achieved that promotion. I do not see any reason, any justification, and I don't care who wrote it, I do not see any justification for training. Now, if in your world somebody finds a brand new weapon, something that he's not familiar with or she's not familiar with, and you want to say, okay, take a week off of campaigning time, and then you can go train for a proficiency in the weapon. It's the only time I can see justifying training is for a different weapon type. We'll talk a little bit more along those lines in a minute on another topic. And then this writer goes on to say the design impetus behind a rule like armor proficiency isn't realism, but rather niche protection, archetype enforcement. No. Mages avoid armor not because they're not trained in it, but because armor impedes their spell casting. Thieves don't wear armor heavier than leather because the weight interferes with their specialized skills, etc. Yeah, it impedes their spell casting because you can't wear iron or steel or any ferrous material because the basic accumulated aggregate canon says that interferes with casting. Okay. You're really classifying max deadlifting 180 pounds as 18 strength. Lol. Are you serious? Without bragging and boasting how much I max in real life, just as a pastime to go to the gym routinely twice a week and do squats, bench, and deadlift, even as old as a 42-year-old, smaller than the average guy, I can honestly say you just might be a wee bit off in your estimate. Don't believe me? Go DYOR vids of what the powerlifting record lifters who aren't even Olympic powerlifters can do. In my opinion, I'd start at 18 strength as at least 720 pounds. Now, I had an answer to that, which was very succinct. Bullshit. And then there was another one who followed my comment, how much bullshit can a 18 strength deadlift? All right. We actually, back in the day, I can remember this up in the office in the Great Building, Brian Bloom became obsessed with this idea about what do the stats mean. And so we looked at a way of measuring, and usually it was by 10. And so a 16, 17, 18 intelligence, that was like a Mensa IQ. Charisma, 16, 17, 18, that was like some sort of fascination, attraction, whatever, smooth, suave tongue, good looks, ripped, whatever. And we really thought about the strength and the intelligence a lot, and we used metrics. Now remember, the original case was put forward for being an adventurer as you're above average, which is why the average intelligence is 9 to 12, 90 to 120. You're not Mensa level yet. 90's not as sharp on the ball as a 120. Maybe 13's not quite Mensa. Then we got to physical and encumbrance. Now, I'd had experience lugging shit around in the Navy, including 80-pound chain bags up on the flight deck. And so we started talking, Brian and Gary and I, about strength. And we thought that, again, remember, you're above average individual, you're a level 1, not one of the herd, and therefore it's highly likely that you could be better. Everything in there's 9 to 12 as an average. That's what we knew the dice would produce, and most people should be average, even though you're a cut above the hoi polloi. Then we got to lifting. Now, when I was in the service and fit as hell before I got married and fat, I could bench about 170, 180, but that was only after working at it for a while on a weight machine that was on board the boat. I can show you a lot of people that are going to have trouble lifting 30 or 40 pounds and holding it over their head. They simply aren't that strong. Should be, right? Okay. 90 pounds over your head. Okay. 120 over your head. If you have the technique. Okay. Those are average. I knew lots of guys in the service that could deadlift 120 pounds, myself included. And I was a little skinny shit. Weighed 145 pounds. Now I could leg press almost 400. But that's just because I've got freakishly big thighs. So I got to say that, 720 pounds, bullshit. You're not talking power lifters. You're talking about ripped and cut ordinary people, not power lifters. There was an old joke about when you'd go back in the day when Muscle Beach was nothing but bodybuilders and weightlifters all the time out in Southern California. Which way to the beach? That way, because they couldn't extend their arms all the way. I've seen some of the Olympic powerlifters walking around, and I'd be willing to bet they don't have all the flexibility of somebody else. I've seen them. Some of them I don't think can even straighten their arms quite all the way out and make their elbow go flat. But that's beside the point. Anybody that thinks an 18 strength can deadlift 720 pounds has been drinking moldy swamp water or smoking dried banana peels and hallucinating. Even allowing for the fact that you're above the average herd, the hoi polloi, 720 pounds is crap. 18 is 180 pounds. There are people that can do more than 180 pounds. Weightlifters certainly can, but weightlifters end up giving up other things such as flexibility. 720 pounds. Absurd. All right. Now I've got a final closing out piece. And no, I don't know how much a 18 strength bullshit can lift. How much bullshit at 18 can lift. I saw a mini on Etsy featuring a knight riding a Bulette. This prompted me to go to Etsy and fall down the Bulette rabbit hole. Now, I have never asserted ownership of the Bulette, though I own it. I've never said to anybody, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, I've given permission for Bulettes to go into space. That project didn't pan out, but I was okay with it. However, going down the Etsy rabbit hole, it's interesting to see all the different takes on the Bulette. Now, I do not criticize anybody for wanting to expand on the rather primitive drawing of a Bulette that was in the Monster Manual. It's a simple line drawing. Embellishment, more detailed, I understand that. Giving it 3 feet of tail when it didn't have any, I'll give you a little artistic license on that. A little. But I simply do not understand why more Bulette subspecies had to be created. How could you ever possibly get bored running into Bulettes? Whose bullshit idea was it about the jungle Bulette? It clearly states in the Monster Manual that they live in temperate zones. There's a well thought out reason for that, mainly being body heat. All right, they are roughly reptilian. Who decided that it had to have a long whippy tail with spikes on it? Worse yet, who decided to have a long whippy tail with a saw blade on the end? That's not a Bulette. Call it something else. Now, what Reaper did is they called it the Burrowing Horror, I believe. Great model. Mostly complies with the overall description and morphology of a Bulette. A little longer tail, but that's okay. That's artistic license. The book, well, it must have been 5e. One of the books has it, pictures of it, living, a skeletal outline, living underground, etc., etc. And I'm okay with that. But I don't need a pygmy. I don't look upon them kindly, as is my right as the creator of the monster and the species. I don't like them. I don't think you need an Arctic Bulette, a jungle Bulette. Number one, they live in temperate zones. So if you have something that doesn't live in a temperate zone, it's not a Bulette. Plain and simple. There's a lot of really, really nice models on the Etsy website with Bulettes. The one I most object to is a cavalier riding a Bulette. A Bulette is an evil, vicious, mean, tiny-brained, nasty. The only justification for having somebody ride it would be some incredibly powerful wizard who had forced it to his control. There's no other basis for that. Yeah, it makes a nice looking mini, but I sure as hell wouldn't let it in my game. You know, Dragon Riders. When was the last time you saw a miniature, Dragon Rider model that wasn't evil? Or let me ask this: when was the last time that you didn't think that the ratio of evil Dragon Riders to good Dragon Riders wasn't at least 3-1? That's my rant for the week. If you don't like the way the Bulette is statted out, develop your own monsters. Don't call it a Bulette. That's like calling a bonobo a chimp. They're both primates, and they both look pretty much alike, but they're not. They're not even the same species. Again, from last week, how many damn monsters do you need to keep from getting bored? I'm sorry for those people who think that they fight something once and never have to fight it again or see it again. I'm sorry for any DM who feels that he must keep giving them new things. I don't like several of the interpretations of the Bulette. I have that privilege. It is my opinion. And with that, I'll say, Dodata Gobi.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with Tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller,
live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.